I turned 66 on a Thursday that smelled faintly of rain and lemon from the cake I'd baked. People always ask me if age changes you. It does. It sharpens the edges you tried so long to smooth. My name is Lena Hart. I taught geography for 30 years, which means I can read a map the way some people read faces. I notice routes, borders, where things begin and where they end. Lately, the borders of my life have been shrinking. They called it a surprise. My daughter, Claire, had invited me over for brunch. I brought my lemon sponge because she always said my baking made up for everything I couldn't buy. The house smelled like coffee and new paint. Claire hugged me in that quick, efficient way grown children hug people they're proud of from a distance. Her husband, Omar, took my coat and handed me a plate as if I were a guest at a function I'd paid for. Then Claire said, smiling too wide, "We have a little planning kit for you, Mom. Read it out loud." It was wrapped in pastel paper with a silver bow. I laughed because that's what you do when you don't want to hear what's coming. Inside was a glossy brochure titled, Comfort and Care Communities, Make the Right Move. There were photos of smiling strangers strolling with matching walkers. Claire and Omar chuckled. Her teenage son filmed the moment for his friends. The room went still in the way that lets laughter echo. I felt every eye measure me like I was an exhibit. I could hear, with awful clarity, the tiny cruelty of a family deciding I belonged somewhere else. My hands didn't tremble, not outwardly. I folded the brochure, smiled, and said, "How thoughtful." Then I stood, took my coat, and walked out while they were still waiting for the punchline. On my way home, I didn't cry. I catalogued instead the dinners I'd cooked, the shifts I'd taken, the nights I'd sat with homework under lamplight. The ledger of a life of small, steady givings. And a new, unwelcome line had been drawn. When I closed my front door, that line felt less like an ending and more like a map. I had no idea where the path would lead, only that I would choose the direction. Tomorrow I would begin to redraw the borders. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Old habits. Teachers are trained to rise with the bell, even years after retirement. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock. I stood at the kitchen window with a mug of coffee cooling in my hands, staring at the street lamp casting its cone of light on the empty road. That brochure lay on my counter, folded neatly. I should have thrown it in the bin, but something in me resisted. Instead, I opened it again and studied the staged photographs, those strangers pretending to smile at each other, as if they'd chosen exile. And then, tucked between the glossy pages, I found something I hadn't noticed the night before, a slip of paper. A handwritten note, in a script I didn't recognize. It wasn't from Claire. She never wrote anything by hand anymore. It read, "If you don't want to be put away, call this number. Tonight. Midnight." The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. My first thought was that it was a cruel prank. But who would plant it there? Not Claire, not Omar. They wanted me softened, not frightened. I turned the note over in my fingers again and again. At the bottom was a number, no name attached. Just 10 digits that looked both harmless and dangerous. By the time the sun had fully risen, I'd already made up my mind. At midnight, I would dial. Midnight came slowly, the way it always does when you're waiting for it. I sat in my armchair with the note folded in my palm, the house dark except for the lamp at my elbow. Every minute I told myself not to be ridiculous. Every minute I stayed put. At 11:59, I dialed. The line clicked once, then a voice, low, calm, unhurried. "Mrs. Hart," it said. Not a question. A statement. I felt my throat tighten. Who is this? Someone who understands that you don't belong where they want to send you. A pause. I could hear faint sounds in the background, like the clatter of dishes or voices far away. A cafe, maybe. The voice continued. "You gave too much of your life away to be discarded like a file in a drawer. If you want another option, come to Elm Street Station. Platform 3. Tomorrow. Noon." The line went dead before I could answer. I sat with the receiver in my hand, staring at nothing, the hum of silence filling the room. The rational part of me said it was madness. A scam, a setup, a cruel trick. And yet, there was a precision in that voice, an authority that made me think whoever they were, they already knew I would come. At noon the next day, I found myself walking toward the station, the note in my pocket like a compass I couldn't ignore. Elm Street Station hadn't changed much in 30 years. The same cracked tiles, the same pigeons stalking crumbs like they owned the place. At noon sharp, I stood on platform 3, heart beating harder than I'd admit to anyone. That's when I saw him. Not the shadowy figure I half expected, not a man in a trench coat from some cheap detective show. No, he looked ordinary. Mid-50s, worn leather jacket, hair going silver at the temples. He held a folded newspaper under one arm and scanned the platform like he was just another commuter. Our eyes met. He gave the slightest nod, then walked toward me. "Mrs. Hart," he said, as if we were old acquaintances. "Thank you for coming." I swallowed. "You left the note." He smiled faintly. "Let's just say I arranged for it to reach you." He gestured toward a bench, and I sat, against my better judgment. He didn't waste time. "Your daughter and her husband have made decisions without you. They're planning to move you out of your home in less than 3 weeks. Papers have already been drawn up." A cold weight settled in my chest. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I used to work in the business," he said, leaning closer. "I know the shortcuts, the quiet ways families make people disappear into those places. My name is Adrian, and I'm here to give you a choice." I narrowed my eyes at him. "You expect me to believe some stranger who corners me at a train station? For all I know, you're the one running a scam." Adrian didn't flinch. He unfolded his newspaper, smoothed it across his knee, and slid a document free from between the pages. He handed it to me like a teacher passing back homework. I hesitated before taking it. My name was printed at the top, followed by lines of neat legal text. I scanned quickly, the words cutting through me like glass. It was exactly what he'd said, a transfer of property, with my daughter and her husband listed as guarantors. The date was set for 3 weeks from now. How did you get this?" I whispered. He shrugged, as if it were nothing. "I told you. I used to work in the system. People pay me to find things that aren't meant to be found." I pressed the paper to my lap, hands shaking despite myself. "If what you say is true, why help me?" For the first time, his expression softened. "Because I've seen too many people shoved aside. You deserve better than to be filed away and forgotten. But you'll have to decide fast, Mrs. Hart. What you do next determines whether you keep your freedom." I folded the paper, slid it into my handbag, and studied his face. Ordinary. Unremarkable. And yet he knew things no one else should. "Suppose I believe you," I said slowly. "What exactly are you offering me?" Adrian leaned back on the bench, as if we were two old friends passing time. "What I'm offering isn't a place, Mrs. Hart. It's a path. But it's not written down anywhere, and it doesn't come with glossy brochures." I studied him, searching for cracks in his composure. "A path to what?" He gave a thin smile. "To staying in control of your own life. To deciding where you go and who you answer to. But it isn't free. It requires trust. And risk. Trusting a man I just met at a train station? Or trusting a family that's already decided your future without asking?" His words landed sharper than I wanted them to. I looked away, watching a train rumble past, windows flashing with the faces of strangers who didn't care who I was or where I was going. Adrian continued, his voice steady low. "Tonight, you'll get another envelope. No return address. Inside will be instructions. If you follow them, you'll see what I mean. If not," he shrugged, folding his newspaper again, "then nothing changes. You go back home, and the plan your daughter has for you carries on." He stood, adjusted his jacket, and glanced at me one last time. "Either way, Mrs. Hart, the choice is yours. Just remember, silence is a decision too." And then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd as if he'd never been there. I sat frozen on the bench, handbag heavy with the papers, wondering whether the envelope would actually come, and more terrifyingly, whether I would dare to open it. The next morning, I moved through my house like a guest in someone else's life. I watered the plants, sorted the mail, stirred porridge on the stove. All the while, the document Adrian had slipped me sat folded on the counter, pulsing like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. Every ordinary sound seemed sharper, the kettle hissing, the creak of floorboards, even the neighbor's dog barking at the postman. I caught myself glancing out the window every few minutes, half expecting to see Adrian standing across the street. He never was. I tried calling Claire, just to hear her voice, to remind myself this was still my family, not enemies plotting against me. She didn't pick up. A text arrived instead, "Busy today, Mom. We'll talk later." Later. Always later. At lunch, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the brochure again. Those staged smiles mocked me. A prison wrapped in pastel. I wondered if Adrian had been telling the truth or if he was just clever at preying on doubt. By late afternoon, I was pacing. Shadows stretched long across the living room, the silence so complete I could hear the ticking of the wall clock like a drum. I told myself I wouldn't wait for an envelope, that I'd crumple the note, tear the paper, throw everything away. But when evening fell, I found myself listening for the soft scrape of mail through the slot, every nerve strung tight with expectation. And at 9:30, it came. A plain brown envelope, slipped under the door. I picked it up slowly, as if the paper itself might bite. The envelope was unmarked, sealed with a single strip of tape. No handwriting, no return address. My hands didn't tremble, though my breath did. I carried it to the table, slid a butter knife under the flap, and tore it open. Inside were two things. The first was a small brass key, old but polished, looped through a plain tag that read only, "Locker 312 Central Station." The second was a single sheet of paper. Typed, not handwritten this time. "Tomorrow. 4 p.m. Don't tell anyone. What you do with what you find is up to you." No signature, no flourish, just the bluntness of certainty. I set the page down, staring at the key in my palm. It was cold, heavy, real. The kind of object that carries weight because it belongs to something hidden. For the first time since this began, a flicker of something stirred in me, not fear, not even hope, but the raw thrill of possibility. Tomorrow at 4, I would go. The key felt heavier with each hour that passed. I slipped it into my coat pocket the next morning, though I couldn't stop touching it, pressing my fingers against the cold metal as if to be sure it hadn't vanished. The day crawled. I tried to busy myself, washing dishes, sweeping the porch, even sorting through an old box of lesson plans from my teaching days. But my thoughts circled back again and again. Locker 312. 4 o'clock. By 3:30 I was out the door, coat buttoned, handbag over my arm. The autumn air was sharp, the kind that makes every sound carry. My shoes tapped against the pavement in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. On the bus, I kept scanning faces. Ordinary people, a man reading the sports page, a young mother rocking her baby, a teenager with earbuds drowning out the world. And yet, I felt watched, as though Adrian or someone else was testing whether I'd keep the appointment. Central Station was busier than Elm Street had been. The echo of announcements bounced off the high ceiling, footsteps and rolling luggage blending into a restless tide. I walked quickly, but not too quickly, past the ticket counters and down the long corridor where the lockers lined the wall in neat rows. I found 312 midway down, wedged between two battered doors with chipped paint. The brass key fit perfectly. My hand froze on the lock for just a second, because once I turned it, there'd be no undoing. I inhaled, turned the key, and pulled the door open. Inside locker 312 was a single leather-bound folder, dark brown and worn at the edges. Nothing else. No money, no strange devices, no elaborate puzzles. Just the folder. I pulled it out, surprised by its weight. On the front, a slip of paper was tucked under the strap. "For your eyes only." I opened it. Neatly arranged inside were documents, copies of bank transfers, property deeds, and legal filings. My name appeared again and again, threaded through pages I'd never seen before. Each page mapped out the quiet dismantling of my life, my house, my accounts, even my pension. All routed toward Claire and Omar. But there was more. At the back of the folder, clipped together, were photographs. Blurred, candid shots of my daughter and her husband in meetings with lawyers, sliding papers across polished desks. Dates and times scrawled in the corners, as if someone had been tracking them for weeks. The evidence was undeniable. Adrian hadn't been bluffing. I shut the folder, clutching it to my chest as though it might vanish if I loosened my grip. Around me, people bustled past. Commuters hurrying home, travelers dragging suitcases, all unaware that in my hands I held the proof that my own family had already signed me away. And yet, beneath the shock, I felt something else stirring. Not despair. Not fear, but resolve. I finally had the map. I didn't go home. Not yet. The folder pressed against my ribs like a second heartbeat as I walked back through the station, scanning faces. Adrian had to be here. And there he was, leaning against a pillar near the cafe, as casual as if he'd been waiting for a train all along. When his eyes met mine, he straightened and gave a small nod. "You found it," he said. Not a question. I tightened my grip on the folder. "Why?" My voice was sharper than I intended. "Why do all this for me? Don't give me riddles, give me the truth." For the first time, he looked older. Not in years, but in wear. He motioned toward a quieter corner, and I followed, still wary. "My mother," he said finally. "She was like you. Sharp. Independent. She raised me alone, taught school until her hands ached. And when she turned 70, my uncle had her signed into a home so he could sell her house. She never wanted it. She told me, the last time I saw her, that she felt erased." His jaw clenched. I tried to fight it, but I was too late. She died 6 months later. I never forgave myself. So now when I see it happening again, when I see families doing this quietly, behind closed doors, I step in. I can't fix what I failed her, but I can stop it for someone else. The words sat heavy between us. He wasn't performing. I could hear the fracture in his voice, the weight of something carried too long. I exhaled slowly. "And what do you expect from me in return?" "Nothing," he said. Then softer, "except that you don't let them win. That you don't give up what's yours without a fight." I looked at him, really looked at him. A man driven not by profit or power, but by guilt that hadn't found a place to rest. And for the first time, I believed him. I held the folder tighter, feeling its weight shift from burden to weapon. "All right," I said. "If you've gone this far, then help me finish it. I don't want to just know the truth. I want to stop them." A flicker of approval passed over Adrian's face. "Good. Then we don't waste time." He led me to a small cafe tucked into the side of the station. We sat in a booth at the back, out of earshot. He ordered black coffee. I didn't bother. My nerves were already sharp enough. He spread a notebook across the table, pages filled with cramped handwriting and clipped articles. "What you have there is proof, but raw proof won't protect you. Claire and Omar can claim you misunderstood, that you're confused, even unstable. Judges listen to families, not the ones being shuffled away." I bristled. "So what's the alternative?" "We make the story bigger than them," Adrian said. He tapped the folder. "We leak this to the right people, journalists who've been tracking elder exploitation. Once it's public, your daughter can't quietly move you anywhere without scrutiny." The idea was terrifying and liberating. My shame at Claire's betrayal battled with a strange, rising clarity. "You've done this before," I said slowly. "Twice," Adrian admitted. "One woman walked free and still lives in her home today. The other, she chose to leave the country altogether. And me. That's up to you." He met my eyes squarely. "But you're not powerless, Lena. Not unless you choose to be." For the first time in days, my breath steadied. He was right, I did have a choice. And I would not go quietly. I hadn't even made it home before Claire called. Her name lit up my phone like a warning flare. I considered ignoring it, then answered, my voice flat. "Mom," she said, too brightly. "We need to talk. Omar and I are coming over tonight." A chill ran through me. "Why?" Her tone sharpened instantly. "Because I said so. Don't make this difficult." That old reflex, the one that made me shrink, apologize, smooth things over, surged in my chest. But I pressed my lips together and said nothing. At 7 sharp, the doorbell rang. Claire swept in like she owned the place, Omar trailing behind. She didn't hug me this time. She went straight to the kitchen, opening cupboards, tuteing at dishes in the sink. "Mom, honestly, you can't keep living like this." I bit back a reply, but she wasn't finished. She turned, folding her arms. "You've been off. Forgetful. Do you even remember our brunch? You embarrassed me in front of Omar's family. And then you stormed out like a child. Do you know how that looked?" Her words hit like stones, not because they were true, but because they echoed the script she'd always used. Twist, belittle, reduce. When I didn't answer, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. Look, Mom, I'm trying to make this easy. But if you keep resisting, we'll have to take formal steps. And once that happens, you won't have a choice in the matter. I felt the folder's weight in my handbag where it hung from the chair. My pulse raced. Adrian's warning rang clear in my head. Omar finally spoke, quiet but firm. Claire's right. The paperwork is already moving. We're doing this for your safety, Lena. I swallowed, fighting the urge to show my hand. You should go, I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. Now. Claire's smile was sharp as glass. You can be angry, that's fine. But this is happening. With you or without you. They left without another word. The door clicked shut, leaving the house colder than before. I sat for a long time at the kitchen table, every nerve alight. If there was ever any doubt before, it was gone now. Claire didn't see me as a person anymore. Just a problem to be managed, a property to be seized. And suddenly, Adrian's plan no longer felt like risk. It felt like survival. Adrian didn't look surprised when I told him about Claire's visit. He just listened, arms folded, until I finished. She's tightening the noose, he said quietly. Which means we move now. But before we go to journalists, I need to know you're ready. I bristled. You think I'm not? He shook his head. I think you've been trained to doubt yourself. Claire's good at that. She makes you small so you won't fight back. If you're going to take this all the way, you have to prove you can stand your ground when it counts. My stomach knotted. And how exactly do I prove that? Adrian slid a phone across the table. A number was already dialed in. This is a lawyer I trust. She specializes in elder exploitation cases. Call her. Tell her everything. Don't apologize. Don't second guess. Just state the truth. If you can do that, we'll move to the next step. The phone felt heavier than it should. A call, so simple, so ordinary. And yet my hands shook as I picked it up. For years, my voice had been the smallest thing in the room whenever Claire was near. Could I make it loud again? I pressed the phone to my ear. A woman answered. This is Marisol Vega. My throat tightened. For a split second, I wanted to hang up, retreat into silence. Then I thought of Claire's smirk in my kitchen, Omar's quiet certainty, the folder of proof tucked away in my bag. My name is Lena, I began, my voice trembling but clear. And I think my daughter is trying to erase me. Adrian watched, expression unreadable, as I told the lawyer everything. When I hung up, my heart was pounding, not from fear, but from something else. A raw, urgent strength I hadn't felt in years. Adrian nodded once. Good. Now we're ready. Marisol Vega called back the next morning. Her voice was brisk but not unkind. I've reviewed what you sent, she said. And if even half of it holds up in court, your daughter and her husband are in deep trouble. Something inside me loosened, like a knot I hadn't realized was strangling me. Marisol continued, I've seen this before, Lena. Families using guardianship laws as weapons. But you've got what most people don't, hard evidence. That folder could turn the whole case around. Adrian leaned forward, listening carefully. Will you take it? He asked. I'll do more than take it, Marisol replied. I'll file an injunction to freeze any action until we get in front of a judge. That buys us time. But we need to be smart. If Claire realizes you've got counsel, she'll double down fast. I swallowed. She already threatened me. Then good, Marisol said. That plays in our favor. Judges hate seeing intimidation tactics. I'll need you to keep documenting everything. Calls, visits, comments. The more, the better. Adrian gave a small smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. Told you she was the right one. I felt it too, the faintest sense of armor wrapping around me. For so long, I'd been alone in Claire's shadow. Now, with Adrian on one side and Marisol on the other, I wasn't just a target. I was a fighter with allies. For the first time, it felt like Claire might not win. We met in Marisol's office, a narrow room above a row of shuttered shops. The blinds were half closed, and stacks of case files leaned against every wall. It smelled faintly of coffee and ink. Adrian sat across from me, his notebook open. Marisol paced as she spoke, sharp and precise. "Step 1, she said, tapping the folder I'd brought. "We organize this evidence. Bank transfers, property deeds, and those photographs, they form a narrative. Judges respond to stories, not just numbers. We show a clear pattern of coercion and exploitation." I nodded, clutching the strap of my bag. "And then?" "Step 2, witnesses. Has Claire ever spoken about this in front of others? Friends, neighbors, anyone who could confirm she's been pushing you toward a home?" I hesitated. Maybe Mrs. Kim across the street. She heard Claire once, saying I was becoming a burden. "Good. We'll get a statement." Adrian leaned forward. "And step 3. Marisol stopped pacing. "We make noise. Quiet cases die in silence. But if this hits the right ears before Claire can paint Lena as incompetent, the pressure shifts. Journalists, advocacy groups, watchdogs, I have contacts. We'll leak selectively." My pulse quickened. "Won't that make Claire furious?" "Yes," Marisol said plainly. "But fury makes people sloppy. If she lashes out, she reveals herself. That's when we strike hardest." Adrian's eyes met mine. "Are you ready for that? Because once we go public, there's no pulling back." I thought of Claire's smile in my kitchen, the way she looked at me like I was already gone. Then I thought of my own voice on the phone with Marisol, shaking but steady. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." Marisol gave a thin smile. "Then let's begin." It didn't take long. 2 days after our meeting with Marisol, Claire showed up unannounced. No knock, no warning, just the rattle of her key in my lock. I was in the living room when she barged in, her face already flushed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she snapped. I froze. "Excuse me." "Don't play dumb." She slammed her bag onto the table. "A lawyer called me. Marisol Vega. Said she represents you." My stomach dropped. She wasn't supposed to know that yet. Claire stepped closer, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea how insane you sound? You've let some stranger get in your head, filling you with paranoia, making you think we're the enemy." "You are," I said quietly. The words shocked even me. I'd never said them out loud before. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed into slits. "After everything I've done for you. After cleaning up your messes. After making sure you wouldn't end up forgotten in some dingy apartment. This is how you repay me? By dragging our family name through the mud." Omar appeared in the doorway, silent but watchful. He didn't intervene. He never did. Claire leaned down until her face was inches from mine. Her tone dropped to a hiss. "You think a lawyer will save you? You think you can fight us? Mom, you're weak. You always have been. And I'm done pretending otherwise." Something inside me snapped. I stood, not tall, not imposing but steady. "No, Claire. I'm not weak. Not anymore." For a moment, she faltered. Then she snatched her bag, muttering, "You'll regret this." The door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass. Silence fell. My hands trembled, but not with fear. With adrenaline. I picked up the phone and dialed Adrian. "It's time," I said. "She knows." Adrian moved quickly once I made the call. Within hours, he and Marisol were at my kitchen table, laptops and papers spread out like we were staging a war room. Marisol's voice was clipped, efficient. "We'll release excerpts of the documents, enough to establish credibility, but not the full folder. If Claire tries to deny it, she'll contradict herself." Adrian added, "I'll send them to 2 journalists I trust. One local, one national. If both bite, the story can't be buried." My heart hammered as I handed over the folder. For weeks it had been my secret shield. Now I was placing it in their hands. That night, the articles went live. Elder exploitation, local woman fights alleged coercion by family. Legal guardian or property thief. New case highlights growing crisis. The photographs of Claire and Omar in meetings were blurred but recognizable. The documents, redacted but damning. My name wasn't hidden, either. I was no longer invisible. The calls started the next morning. Advocacy groups. reporters, even neighbors who had barely nodded at me before suddenly wanted to talk. And then Claire's voice message, sharp with fury. How dare you drag our private family business into the press? You've humiliated me. You've humiliated Omar. Do you even realize what you've done? For once, I didn't feel crushed by her words. I felt taller, stronger. Because this time, she wasn't speaking to a woman cornered in her own kitchen. She was speaking to someone who had finally, unmistakably, fought back. Adrian leaned back in his chair, watching me listen to the message. Congratulations, Lena, he said softly. You just lit the fire. The first summons arrived 3 days after the articles broke. Claire had filed for emergency guardianship, citing concerns about my mental competence and safety. Marisol dropped the papers onto her desk with a sharp flick. Classic move. She's trying to flip the narrative, claim you're unstable so the judge dismisses your side before it starts. I felt the familiar sting of doubt creep in. And what if it works? Adrian shook his head. It won't. Not with what we have. Marisol sat across from me, her tone firm but measured. Here's the strategy. 1. We'll present the documents you found. 2. We'll introduce witness statements. Mrs. Kim, the bank clerk who flagged unusual withdrawals, anyone who can testify to your clarity. 3. We'll establish a paper trail showing Claire and Omar's financial interest in this guardianship. She leaned forward. But most importantly, Lena, you're going to testify. The judge needs to hear your voice. Clear, steady, unbroken. The thought made my stomach twist. For years, I'd been trained to shrink under Claire's voice. Now I'd have to raise mine against hers in a courtroom filled with strangers. Adrian touched my arm lightly. You've already done harder. Remember that call to Marisol? This is the same thing, just louder. I took a slow breath. When's the hearing? Next week, Marisol said. But Claire will move fast in the meantime. Expect her to show up again. Expect her to push harder. That's how people like her operate when they know they're losing. The words settled heavy but strangely steady in me. For the first time, it wasn't just me against her. I had a team. I had proof. I had a voice. And I intended to use it. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Pale walls, wooden benches, the faint smell of dust and polish. Claire sat across the aisle with Omar, immaculate in a navy suit, her expression a careful mask of concern. When the judge entered, she leaned forward like a dutiful daughter, hands folded neatly in her lap. Anyone watching might have believed her. Marisol rose first, her voice steady. Your Honor, we are here today because my client, Lena Morgan, is being coerced by her daughter and son-in-law into relinquishing her autonomy. We intend to prove that this guardianship petition is not about care, but about control. Claire stood next, her tone sugar-sweet. With respect, Your Honor, my mother has been struggling. She forgets things. She lashes out. Omar and I only want to ensure she's safe. This is about love, not money. The judge's gaze shifted to me. Mrs. Morgan, are you prepared to speak? My throat tightened. Adrian's words echoed in my head. Remember the call. Just louder. I stood. My knees shook, but my voice carried. Your Honor, I may be aging, but I am not confused. What I forget are unimportant things. Where I put my keys, the name of a neighbor's dog. What I do not forget is my own daughter sitting in my kitchen, telling me I was a burden. Telling me I wouldn't have a choice. That I would be put away, whether I agreed or not. A murmur rippled through the room. Claire's jaw twitched, but she stayed still. Marisol handed the judge the folder. Exhibits a through D, bank transfers, property deeds, photographic evidence of meetings conducted without my client's knowledge. Each transaction benefits Claire Morgan and her husband directly, while stripping Lena Morgan of her assets. The judge leafed through the pages, frown deepening. Claire couldn't hold her tongue. She's being manipulated, she burst out, gesturing toward me. By him, she pointed at Adrian. Some outsider who filled her head with lies. Adrian didn't flinch. Marisol simply raised an eyebrow. Or perhaps by her own greed? The judge rapped the gavel once. Enough. He turned to me. Mrs. Morgan, do you wish to live independently? I lifted my chin. Yes. It is my right, and I will fight to keep it. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute. Then the judge spoke. This court finds insufficient evidence to grant emergency guardianship. The petition is denied. Claire gasped. Omar lowered his gaze. And me, for the first time in years, I felt air rush into my lungs without weight pressing down on it. I had won. The ruling echoed in my ears long after the gavel struck. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than I had in years, though the folder was still tucked under my arm. Adrian and Marisol flanked me, but I no longer felt like I needed them to hold me upright. I was standing on my own. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Claire once leaned over me, hissing that I was weak. The silence of the house felt different now. Not empty. Not lonely. Mine. I made tea. I paid bills. I called Mrs. Kim just to chat. Mundane things, but done with a steadiness I thought I'd lost. Claire didn't call. She didn't come by. Maybe she was licking her wounds, maybe she was plotting, but it no longer mattered. The court had given me my ground, and I knew now how to hold it. Adrian stopped by once, weeks later. He didn't stay long. He just set a hand on my shoulder and said, "She'd be proud, you know. My mother. You didn't let them erase you." I smiled, the kind that reached all the way through me. Neither did you. After he left, I sat alone in the quiet, but not the fluorescent, break room kind of quiet I used to know. This silence hummed with possibility. I was almost 70. My life wasn't over. It was mine again. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what came next. If this story touched you, please let me know what country you are listening from in the comments below. I'm always intrigued to find how far my stories travel. You can also give a like and subscribe. Till next time, stay safe, stay warm and hold your people close.